I want to welcome everyone to the NISS panel on how to be a good mentor. My name is Sam Wang, and I'll be moderating the event today. I know there's some sad and horrific things that are currently happening, and those events are likely weighing heavily on many of us right now. But nonetheless, I'm glad each of you are here and able to join us today despite everything going on. My hope and my expectation is that this session will be helpful to each of you in thinking about mentorship and will benefit not only you, but ultimately the individuals that you mentor as well. So I'm a first-year assistant professor, and so I get to see both sides. I'm a mentor to students, but I'm also mentored by more senior faculty. And so I personally am really excited for this session. We have a wonderful panel today who all bring different perspectives and insights into what makes a good mentor. I'll give a more detailed biography for each of our panelists before their individual times, but I want to briefly introduce each of them now and give an overview of what our time today will look like. So we'll start with each of our four panelists giving a 15-minute discussion about their perspective on how to be a good mentor. So we'll start with Dr. Joel Dubin from the University of Waterloo. We'll have Dr. Renee Moore from Drexel University, Dr. Dan Jeske from the University of California at Riverside, and then Dr. Nick Horton from Amherst College. After all of our speakers, we'll open up for Q&A. So if you came into the session with questions already, that's great. Or if any of the speakers mention something that you'd like to explore further, the Q&A time will be your chance to get those questions answered. With that said, you're welcome to enter questions into the Q&A box at any point throughout the session, and we'll do our best to get to them during the allotted time. All right, so we have a pretty packed schedule, and I don't want to delay us any further, so let's get started. So our first speaker today is Dr. Joel Dubin from the University of Waterloo. Dr. Dubin received his PhD from UC Davis and subsequently served as an assistant professor in biostatistics at Yale. Dr. Dubin arrived as an associate professor at the University of Waterloo in 2005 with a joint appointment in the Department of Statistics and Actuarial Science and the School of Public Health Sciences. His primary research interest is in methods for longitudinal data analysis with an emphasis on multivariate longitudinal data. And he works in a variety of application areas, and I do mean variety, including nephrology, cancer, smoking cessation, intensive care, electronic health records, nutrition, aging, youth health, and environmental issues. He also currently leads the Health Data Science Lab at the University of Waterloo. So Dr. Dubin, thank you for being with us here today. The floor is all yours.
Thank you very much, Sam. And thanks to Samantha and Ezra for helping organize this session, and to Sam and Jim and Megan for various aspects of hosting. And appreciate the kind words in the introduction. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, and hopefully everybody can see that and hear me okay. So apologies for the little bit the image doesn't come through all that well, but effectively says Tom, mentoring is about more than encouraging people to be just like you. And I feel like this is a good entry into the first item I'm going to raise today, which is to be adaptive. I find, and I think everybody who's has served as mentors or has been a mentee and has met other mentees under the same mentor, there's just so much heterogeneity among us. And I say us because those of us who are now mentors have been mentees in the past. So, and especially among you in the audience, no two mentees are the same. We need to understand that. I think trying to, the whole idea of putting a square peg into a round hole, I just find that that's not a good strategy. There certainly are important messages and techniques and skills that we want to have all of our mentees master, but not everyone comes with the same background. Not everyone works at the same pace. Not everyone not everyone has the same level of independence. There's various components of that comprise all the heterogeneity among mentees, and I think we as mentors just need to really understand that that heterogeneity and try to work around everybody's different characteristics. So this is definitely something I think we need to as for you that are either current new mentors or people who are going to become new mentors, I think that's something you should really really embrace. Second point I want to raise is keeping communication lines open. This is I think a huge aspect of trying to be a successful mentor, in the sense that, to start, you want to communicate expectations. You want to communicate your general mentoring style and how you'd like to set things up. I wouldn't be too rigid about how you like to set things up, like in terms of meetings and that kind of thing. I think having regular meetings is really important, but some people are better. Some mentees are better to work with weekly, some are better bi-weekly, some need maybe a little more email exchanging between meetings to keep things in line, and others are just perfectly capable of taking 2 weeks and just being productive. And so but either way, I think no matter what, it's just really important to ensure that you're always in constant communication with your mentees, and that they're very comfortable in being communicative with you. And that's something that hopefully you can state as part of your expectations coming in, that you don't want them to just do their work and never talk to you except at the meetings. I think it's good to establish some kind of relationship, and where there's additional communication, I think there's more that can be done. I think maybe other panelists may have different experiences, but I find that keeping in touch in different ways, and particularly email now, and through Teams chats and that kind of thing, or Zoom chats during the pandemic. But when there's not a pandemic, having an open door, allowing the mentees to come in and ask questions and that kind of thing. Yeah, this is just some advice that I feel is helpful, is to lead but try not to solve. And I think this goes for being an instructor as well. And the idea is you don't want to just do the work and solve things for a given problem. I think it sets up an expectation, and it may it could end up burning you a little bit, in the sense that if the mentee thinks that you're just going to always be able to get them out of a problem whenever one exists that they cannot solve, and I'm talking about technical problems in this case, whether that's mathematical or analytical or computational or whatever it happens to be. I think it's best, even if you know the answer, to just kind of lead them there, but allow them to figure out the end. So maybe give them some hints, but don't actually show off by saying, oh, I can't believe, you won't say, I can't believe you didn't do this, but maybe you're thinking that, or I can't believe you couldn't figure this out. You may be thinking that, but I think it's important to really just kind of give them some clues and hints and allow them to eventually solve things. It'll help their problem solving skills, and then they'll just inevitably get more confidence and feel better as you move forward. I think that's just a good strategy in my opinion. And the last comment, I was mainly focusing on the technical side of things, but I really think soft skills are super important, and I think everybody believes that. But I think that should be something that's discussed regularly with the students, giving them a format to practice presentations, reading the maybe versions of their CVs, and gosh, there's so many different ways of getting them ready for possible questions that might come up in an interview, and these kinds of more softer skills that are things we're not really trained to do, but we as mentors maybe can serve in that role to allow for to allow them to improve various things. And this includes like again, presenting, communication, just some mentees you will find will be more communicative than others, and that ties in with keeping the open lines of communication, but also some people are shyer and they're not going to be as good in a setting where they might need to promote themselves, or be involved in an interview, talk to network and that kind of thing. And I think we as mentors have a role in helping improve on all those areas. Another piece of advice I find is that empathy is good. I think it's good in life, and I think everybody here probably would believe that, whether it's with family members or with friends or with mentees. And I think we have to understand that mentees may be slow at certain times, and we have to kind of figure out why. We have to put ourselves in their shoes to figure out, okay, how can we help them maybe get out of a scenario where they're struggling? And it could be beyond, of course, there's always privacy things that need to be taken in consideration, but at least try to provide some advice that you're there to discuss any issues, and that may be issues that are technical, but they may be issues that are outside of the technical domain, and something going on in their life. And we need to be mindful that we need to roll with these considerations, I think, in my sense, and also to try to be as encouraging as possible. For example, like some people find that work is a nice way of coping when there's other things going on, and that's good, but not everyone's going to think that way, and one needs to kind of get a sense where the mentee is at, and work with them as best you can to try them, either lead them if they require certain help, then try to lead them to obtaining that kind of certain help, or if you can help them in a direct meeting, then that's great too. But ultimately, there's a common goal, and that's to lead your mentee to graduating with obtaining a degree, getting a job in whether that's industry, tech, academia or government, just trying to lead them. So there's a common goal, and one needs to be empathetic, I think, along the way to help them get there successfully. Finally, and I know I'm almost out of time here, just a couple minutes left. So I really suggest embracing leading a research team, at least eventually. If you're just starting out, maybe you just have one student initially, so it's kind of hard to start a team. Maybe you don't have the funding to even allow for to grow a team, but eventually you will. And I think it's a really nice thing. I think, as Sam mentioned in introductions, I run a lab, and I find it's just a really good learning environment. I find that the students talk to one another. They see each other's presentations. And they can comment on them, and I think that helps their own quality of life as a graduate student, in that they're not just working in isolation. Outside of a classroom where, certainly in the classroom, there's, obviously cohorts run together and work together and that kind of thing, and especially in certain classes. But when it comes to research, we're often doing research on our own on a computer or a piece of paper, and we're trying to figure things out. And so I think having a research team can really allow for greater learning opportunities. Not to mention practice runs for presentations, and again, working on those soft skills, and I really feel that that's a good framework for enhanced learning for mentees. Okay, so I think I'm done with my comments. Thanks, Sam.
Thanks, Joel. I really appreciated the point about empathy, which is always important, but particularly so over the past couple of years. So thank you for that.
Yes, thank you. And I want to apologize to my fellow panelists if I went first, so I had the greatest opportunity to steal thunder, and I apologize. If I've taken up any of your main talking points, so sorry about that.
Thank you, Joel. All right, so our next speaker is Dr. Renee Moore. Dr. Moore is currently a research professor, the director of the Biostatistics Scientific Collaboration Center, and the director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for the Department of Epidemiology and Biostatistics at the Dornsife School of Public Health at Drexel University. Dr. Moore received her PhD from Emory and subsequently served as an assistant professor at the Perelman School of Medicine at UPenn. She has also held positions at NC State and most recently, the Rollins School of Public Health at Emory. Throughout her career, Dr. Moore has taught physicians, was the lead statistician in a multi-site randomized clinical trial of sleep apnea, and was the biostatistician in the Center for Weight and Eating Disorders. Dr. Moore's research interests are in the design, conduct, and analysis of clinical trials and statistical applications to obesity, sleep apnea, and health disparities. She has a wealth of experience as a biostatistician collaborating with clinicians, public health practitioners, and scientists. And as evidenced by her willingness to be here with us today, she dedicates much of her time to training the next generation of collaborative biostatisticians and users of statistics. Dr. Moore has been very active in ENAR and the ASA, especially the Committee on Minorities and Statistics. She is also a fellow of the ASA. Dr. Moore, I'm looking forward to hearing you speak. The floor is yours.
Thanks so much to Sam and Jim and all of the organizers today. And so I have prepared my remarks around the questions that NISS put on their webinar event page. And so I'll put my talking points around these questions. So the first question, was it expected of a good mentor in terms of time, availability, resources, types of support, or otherwise? And before entering a mentor-mentee relationship, I encourage us to define our role And I think there are at least 3 potential roles, those of us in academia, and this can translate to those of you who are not in academia as well. Are you going to be an advisor? And we have several types, as we know: academic advisor, thesis, dissertation, research, teaching. Are you going to be a mentor? Are you going to be an advocate? And no, these roles are not mutually exclusive. You could take on 1, 2, or 3 of these. So a little bit more. An advisor, to me, there's clear guidelines in terms of time, availability, resources. Usually when you take on a student for a PhD dissertation, right? A lot of times you're providing resources or making sure the student has the resources. You're making yourself available, somewhat of the time commitment. There is a deliverable. I must get this student to the finish line to complete this dissertation so this person is awarded their doctorate. A mentor goes beyond the advising and listens, and listens to things about research, life, next steps, planning. And then I wrote gives advice, and this goes along with Joel, so not stealing thunder at all, Joel. I appreciate when we have things in common. Joel said lead, but try not to solve. And I agree, right? A mentor, we listen and we give advice, but really we're helping students to find their direction. We're helping them to find their best fit. We're helping them to move to the next stage to get over this obstacle. And then an advocate steps it up. One more. An advocate is a cheerleader for a student when they're not in the room. An advocate creates opportunities and finds resources. An advocate creates a network so the student can have a mentoring team of advisors, mentors, and advocates. And again, these roles are not mutually exclusive. So let me give you an example of sort of what I mean, modified from an example colleague just shared. So a student comes in requesting a signature to drop a course. An advisor signs the form. The result, the student drops the course. A mentor asks the students, why do you want to drop the course? The student says, I'm doing poorly. The mentor says, how do you know you're doing poorly? The student says, it just feels like it. The mentor says, go talk to the professor and see how you're really doing. The student goes, talks to the professor and finds out the student's actually earning A's. And so the result, the student stays in the course with renewed confidence and does well. An advocate does all the things the mentor does, but the advocate also reaches out to their colleague and talks to the professor for insight and shares some pointers with the students based on that conversation. An advocate connects the student with a senior student who has taken the course, who did well, and so the senior student can share insight and pointers. The advocate provides resources and networks. Sorry, I'm pausing because I gotta move my face. And networks that may enable the student to build confidence, to talk to someone if there are any mental health concerns, introduces a student or talks about how the student can create a larger community. I have examples like the Graduate Student Association, the ENR Council for Emerging and New Statisticians, a certain ASA committee. So what's the result of the advocate? The student stays in the course with renewed confidence, does well, and now this student has a wealth of resources and a network that will benefit the student beyond the class. So how to be a good mentor? What is your role? Again, these roles are not mutually exclusive. So you might say, can we and should we be an advocate for every student that walks in the door? I would love to, but the honest answer is no, we can't be an advocate. We can't go this far for every single student that walks in the door. I do not have unlimited time and resources. Most of us in academia are really busy. I'm really busy because I love it. I still have to do better at saying no than yes, but I love what I do. But that means I don't have time for every person who walks in my door to be an advocate for them. Also, the student may not want that kind of relationship, or they may not be in a place to receive it. also, I may not be the best person who can be an advocate. You know, perhaps the person's in a different field. If the person wants to concentrate on statistics, education, and data science, Nick may be a better advocate for them than me, for example. All right, question 2 was, what do you need to learn about your mentees in order to form a successful working relationship? Again, what is your role? I think is part of this. And then what is the goal of this mentor-mentee relationship? And the goal should come from the mentee. And so I list some, right? Help me choose a graduate program. Help me navigate through graduate school. Help me choose a dissertation advisor, or this isn't working. How do I change a dissertation advisor? I've had students come to me about that. Or is it to provide a collaborative research experience or a teaching experience? So what is the goal? And that's part of what we need to learn before we enter. Are you a good personality fit, right? For me, can I be my true me? So now I've learned when students, when we're talking about entering a relationship, I say, I want you to know I'm a New Jersey girl and I was trained to teach high school math. And so that comes with some sort of gut and some sort of thing. So I warn people, I tell it like it is. I'm sometimes painfully honest. I'm embarrassed to say I've had mentees cry after our chats. And why? But in this really honest conversation, I'm identifying habits or behaviors that need improvement. But I'm also saying you can do better. You're not giving your best self. What's going on? How can I help? And sometimes these are really sensitive and hard conversations. But again, these comments refer to a mentor or advocate going that extra step to find out more. I tell my mentees, I can only be your mentor if we can be transparent and honest. I can't help you if I don't know what's going on. And I wrote, barring some TMI, too much information details, but if that's part of it and you have personal things you want to share, I can handle it. I can keep it in confidence, and I can help us balance our personal life and work, because that's a constant battle for all of us to balance it. I also tell people I'm so busy at work. I have too many hats, but again, I love it at home. Right now, I have a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old. I live in a 3-generation house. I'm so busy. I'm bad at email. That's one of my weaknesses. So I tell my mentees, it's your job to make sure I'm here for you. It's your job to make sure we're meeting. If I didn't answer that email, send it to me again. Put in all caps. I give them permission. Put in all caps. Yell at me. Be like, time sensitive. Can we meet? Set up a meeting. So, I think Joel talked about keeping the communications line open. So this is part of this as well. All right. And then for me, what do I need to learn about my mentees? How can I motivate and inspire my mentee? What makes them click? What makes them smile? And this is so that I can provide the appropriate motivation, resources, and experiences during the low. I tell folks entering graduate school, particularly a doctorate program, the highs are really, really high, but the lows are really low too. And so I want to be that mentor and advocate that knows my mentee to help them get through the lows. And then what is the plan set in place to help my mentee complete the goal we've outlined? And again, I refer back to, right, knowing that I'm so busy, knowing I'm bad at email, knowing what the goal is of this relationship, what we're entering this for, how I'm helping you right now. What is our plan? And as Joel said, this can be flexible, adaptive, it can change instead of meeting times, but let's set up a plan first and see how it goes, and then adapt it based on whatever we're trying to achieve through this mentor-mentee relationship. Also, I want to know what's the next step for my mentee. So it's not even, I want to know what we're doing now, what's our goal now, and how does the now connect to the later. All right, so the third question I saw was, should you adapt your mentoring style depending on your mentee's level of education, role, or even the number of people you are mentoring? And I said, not necessarily yes or no, because in the things I just talked about in defining your role, determining the goal of this mentor-mentee relationship, and learning about your mentee, we have a tailored plan, right? How do you manage having a large number of mentees? Joel touched on this. Yes, for team meetings, absolutely. Have team meetings when mentees are at all stages. This allows the junior student can see the senior students, and they can see themselves what it's like at the next goal, that they can reach the next goal. It allows senior students to interact with junior students. And now I'm strengthening the teaching and the mentoring of the senior student, helping them to build confidence. And when they're in their lows, being in this team, right, helps them to remember how far they've come. And it also facilitates this crucial skill set of sharing and building and working in teams, which, you know, is so important for our mentees, no matter whether they go to academia, industry, government. So how do you manage having a large number of mentees? Connect mentees to each other. For example, right now I have a current MS student interviewing. She interviewed at 4 places, and I was able to identify mentees at 3 of these places who work there now or in the past who have interned there. And when I reach out and said, I have a mentee and she's going to interview, can you talk to her about that experience? Can you give her tips for the interview? And all my mentees say yes. And so part of what I ask as a mentor to a mentee is I ask my mentees to pay it forward. And the things that you found positive in this relationship that helped you, pay it forward, please. When I reach out, when you see somebody else who need you see what them and you, or you and them, help out, stand in the gap. Also, how do we manage a large number of mentees? As I said, sadly, I can't be an advocate for each of them, but I can connect them to advocates. I can't be everybody's mentor mentee. Some of the relationships from the start, we said, I'm probably not the best person. Or as we move forward, like we had to be honest, I've helped you as much as I can. It's time to go. And again, even if I can't do it, I can connect them to someone else. But again, if the student is really ready, right? Because that's my reputation on the line. I'm not going to send them to Joel if I don't think the student's in a place where they're willing to grow and learn. Some other thoughts as I close, short-term versus long-term. Again, this is based on your role and the goal. And it's okay if you're not sure at the beginning. And know your role can evolve over time. And over time, our mentor relationship can be on and off. I said it implicitly, but I want to say it explicitly. Each mentee should have a mentoring team. All team members do not need to be in your field. All team members should not be at your institution. And as a mentor, we must be honest about our strengths and weaknesses. Which goals can you help fill, and which goals are better for another member of the mentoring team? Balance the constructive feedback, the positive, and the room for improvement, and put in Joel's empathy in here, right? Peer mentorship is so valuable. We grow and learn together. We vent and celebrate together. So don't discount the folks that are at the same level of you, or a little above you, a couple years above you, a couple years behind you. Peer mentorship has been some of my best relationships. And then mentoring when you are not an advisor is so rewarding. You get to play a role behind the scenes with no strings attached. The mentee doesn't have to wonder if you have their best interests at heart, as opposed to how does this advance your own research agenda or your center or the things you need to achieve as a chair or as a director. It's true authenticity and guiding students through their milestones and as they negotiate with their relationships and with their advisors, all while none of this is directly attached to you. These are some of my best mentor-mentee relationships. And if you want to learn more about my journey, I just want to know that this is an excellent book. And in there, I was invited to write a chapter, and it's my journey to leadership. And I have 21 lessons learned from my journey from undergraduate to a professor. And so in that, I highlight some of my mentors. And the other chapters in the book, oh my gosh, it's so good. All right, so my closing remarks, how to be a good mentor. It takes time, it takes resources, it takes calm and poise, getting through difficult situations. It's not all rosy, but it is such an honor to be a mentor. When NISS reached out to me, they said that one of my mentees said, you need Renee for this panel. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you to all my mentees. What better honor than to be recognized and recommended by a mentee? It is a privilege to watch my mentees grow and blossom. And it is awesome for me to grow with my mentees and to learn from my mentees. The great thing about what we do is in undergrad, my mentees are my colleagues, and they're our future colleagues. So I will close there. Thank you. Sorry if I went over a minute or two.
I really appreciated kind of the point about thinking clearly and realistically really about kind of what our role is, whether it's an advisor, a mentor, an advocate, and what the potential outcomes of each of those roles is. So I really did appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam.
So our next speaker will be Dr. Dan Jeske. Dr. Jeske is the Vice Provost of Academic Personnel and a professor in the Department of Statistics at the University of California, Riverside. He also previously served a 7-year term as the chair of the Statistics Department at UCR. Currently as Vice Provost, he leads the team at UCR that facilitates the recruitment and advancement of academic employees and provides training and assistance for those employees navigating academic policies. He's a fellow of the ASA and the current past editor-in-chief of the ASA's flagship journal, The American Statistician. He is also currently the president of the International Society of Business and Industrial Statistics, which is a society of the ISI. His research interests have included classification and prediction methodologies, longitudinal data modeling, statistical process control methodologies, biostatistics applications, and reliability modeling. Dr. Jeske, we're glad you've made time in your busy schedule to be here with us today. Please begin whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Sam, and Ezra and NISS for organizing this, giving me a chance to talk to you about some suggestions that I'd like to offer for being a good mentor. So I assume my slides are being seen, so I'll continue then with my suggestions. All right, so I've broken this out into different cohorts of mentoring relationships. And I'm going to start with academia, and I'll say something about industry as well, because I did have a career in Bell Labs before I came to academia. So I wanted to just kind of go through a checklist, and some of these things have been covered by Joel or Renee or both, but expectations certainly has been mentioned, setting good expectations about what the output of a mentoring relationship is going to look like. Is it a report? Is it a paper? Of course, sometimes it's a thesis or a dissertation, but sometimes I think mentees underestimate, the expectations around writing. So we have to maybe make sure they know that there's lots of iterations that go on with that, and you have to build that into your schedule. The technical guidance and the vetting is something that I think varies between disciplines. Sometimes in disciplines, the mentor of a graduate student, for example, is a reviewer of the work that a student does. But in our field, very often, mentoring is more of a collaborative relationship where we actually help with the work and sort of help overcome the hurdles a bit more than some of the other disciplines. It's been mentioned by Joel and Renee that we do have to sort of resist this temptation, of solving the problem for the students. But sometimes we do have to really, I think, be willing to roll up our sleeves and actually do some of that to keep things moving. But we want to make sure that we give our mentees the limelight, that this is their project, this is their work. We're just kind of helping. It's been mentioned that not all mentees are alike. That's true. So we have to discover their capabilities. We have to kind of understand, where we take them isn't the only thing that matters. It's where they started too, and kind of work with what their capabilities are. That's very important. Not to, I think, sometimes there's a temptation to say you don't fit the profile for what I have in mind. I can't work with you. You know, I don't know. I think maybe we have to try to adapt and find a way. It's not going to always work, but I think our first instinct shouldn't be to just drop the student, right? It should be to try and figure out, like, how can I make this work? What can I redefine the problem? Can I somehow find out what they're good at doing? Maybe it's programming, and they can be really good at that part of this project instead of maybe like the theory or the methodology. Discovering their capabilities, and you know, that's kind of like also it's been mentioned that we have to be available and check in with the students. Some of my students tell me they like deadlines. And I think that generally is a good idea. If research is, you can't really schedule innovation, right? So it's hard to be certain about deadlines, but you can say, you know, there's a conference coming up in 9 months, and I'd like you to think about writing an abstract for that conference. You can give deadlines like that. I find that some of the students have writer's block in the beginning when it's time to sit down, and they might really be enthusiastic about the research they're doing and giving good talks about it, but then writing is like a big hurdle for them to overcome. So I've found, at least in a few cases, that if I write the introduction of the paper and set up the roadmap for the paper, that can help them. I've already mentioned about it. It's the distance traveled when we take a student through the understanding what research is, and not necessarily where they end up. If we only care about where they ended up, we might be selecting only the top students, right? So we don't want to, I don't think we want to be that way. And it's very important to be encouraging after setbacks. I think we all can remember our first rejection notice from a journal, and maybe even we can remember one that came last week that still hurts, right? So, but the first one really hurts, particularly if the referees weren't very kind. So we have to understand that could happen, and not keep them from being too discouraged and kind of like deciding that I don't really care anymore. I just want to graduate and get a job in industry. I don't care about the paper. You know, we certainly don't want that. It's been mentioned that we should rehearse with them their presentations. And you know, a big part of our role can be to help them apply for a fellowship or maybe a best paper award at a conference. On the scheduling side of things, I've been on and off with asking my students to write meeting minutes. But I think generally it's a good idea. It certainly can help me when I'm juggling a lot of different things to kind of review, like what did we talk about last time, and what was the expectation coming into this week that they would work on. So sort of documenting that can be good. And recognizing basic needs. I think this falls into what Joel was referring to as empathy, and Renee advocacy. I think you know, if you can try to figure out what might be a problem for them that is slowing them down or distracting them without invading their personal space. That's very important, that we have to respect the boundaries of our students. But at least you can recognize maybe some signals and just maybe chat with them about, you know, how do you think life's treating you, and something like that, right? But I'm going to come back to that at the end about respecting boundaries. So then, all right, so now I need to advance. All right, so now come to faculty colleagues, because that's another part of mentoring. And we want to mentor our junior colleagues. And one way to do that is to see if there's any kind of research collaboration we can involve ourselves with to help them get started. You know, they come into the academia full steam on a particular path that their dissertation research set them up on, and we certainly want them to continue doing that. But it's also important to offer opportunities to broaden out and start putting some other paths into place so that they can have a broader research program. So I think that's a good thing that senior colleagues can try to do for junior colleagues. And we can also help them by pre-reviewing papers and proposals that are going to be very crucial for them as they embark on their assistant professorship. And through that, we're also recognizing what their talents and skills are, and we can connect them with our network and help them understand what opportunities they might have for professional service and professional development. Because it isn't only about writing papers and getting grants, but it's also getting the recognition for those achievements in a broader audience. You know, someday they're going to need letters from people, so they have to start meeting people. And teaching, you know, it can be an abrupt transition from being a PhD student and going into a classroom of 300 people and teaching introductory statistics or even advanced statistics. So, and they might come in with expectations of students that, you know, that are too high, quite frankly, you know, because we're used to, as PhD students, palling around with people that are like us and are motivated to study statistics and are good at it. And then all of a sudden we're teaching a service course on the campus and we have to understand the difference. And sometimes that is a little bit of an awakening. The other thing we can do is help explain how the campus works. What are the policies and procedures around the department? What does the department value in terms of service? What are they looking for in terms of like collaborative research and multidisciplinary research? Kind of explain the lay of the land. And then there's personalities too. You know, it's important to kind of know where the landmines can be at times. You know, not every department has a wonderful climate. I think, you know, we might be fortunate that we do, but it isn't always the case. So we have to help people understand how to communicate with people. It's already intimidating as an assistant professor to know that you're being judged, right, by these tenured faculty, these senior faculty that have been there for a long time. So they're a little timid often about that sort of, you know, pecking order. So it's good for a mentor to help them assimilate into the climate, I think. And co-advising graduate students is a good thing that can be done. Certainly being a champion to help them get on the road to being fellows and to winning some of these prizes and awards that would dress up their file. So now switching to staff. You know, these faculty, colleagues, and students and staff, it's kind of, there's a lot of similarities, but it is a little bit different. So, you know, someday you might be mentoring staff, and I think it's important to acknowledge their contributions. You know, sometimes there's an old saying, I don't really like it, but it's like the faculty are the kings and queens of the campus. What a terrible situation if that's reality anywhere. You know, that the staff are considered a different type of citizen on the campus. We cannot have that, right? So we want to build people up all the time, and including our staff, acknowledging their contributions and being personable with them. Sometimes the staff, you know, they're not going to talk to you about the same things that your colleagues or your students want to talk about. So you have to be patient and interested, be sincerely interested, listen to them. One of the best things is to give them responsibility, help them help you by not micromanaging them, right? I just love it when I can just ask somebody, can you take care of this and let me know if you need help, right? What a great way to free up some of your own time and make them feel empowered that they're not just being told what to do all the time. And training for staff is important so that they feel like they're, you know, have competencies and have some depth in the areas that they work. On that side of the campus, there's these spot awards that you can nominate them for, you know, $500 prizes. See if you can do that for some of them. And sometimes the career paths for staff, you really have to work with them so that they can understand what it is, because it might not have like all the ranks and all the steps associated with everything that we do on the professorial side. And constructive feedback is always good for everyone. And you don't want to, you know, just give sort of a lukewarm, praising only performance review for staff. I think they do want to have honest and open feedback. Finally, with respect to this, I was going to say about industry and how we might change things a little bit if we're mentoring an industry. There, a very important aspect is domain knowledge. You know, you go to work for a company like Bell Labs, telecommunications, you don't know anything really about engineering, microwave radio, or fiber optical channels. That's not what you studied in school if you came up in math and statistics. So a mentor that to help you understand all that is really important and guide you into some of the in-house training options that might be available. And then one thing that's important if you're mentoring somebody in industry is to make sure they don't get bored, because the onboarding in industry can kind of be like, wow, this is stuff I've never really studied before. And it's like, why do I have to read this engineering book? I want to read a statistics book. And they don't feel like maybe they're working on a particular project that's interesting. So make sure that you don't lose them from too much overload of onboarding, and that they have a real technical project to work on through these these regularly scheduled check-ins. I got to tell you, I had a really great mentor at Bell Labs. I want to tell you his name, Hubert Kostel, because he was fantastic at helping me in these areas, and was really a motivating influence for me to try to do the same for people who came after me there. Okay, so I'm going to conclude with some overall things now. Just thinking about being a mentor, it's a good idea to pay attention to who you're mentoring, and try and spread it around with respect to gender and ethnicity. It's also good, it helps keep you going if you can recognize that people will appreciate you for being good at it. It's a very important part of companies and academic campuses that there's a lot of need out there for mentoring. And if you can carve out time to do it well, I think you will get recognized for it, apart from the overall satisfaction you'll derive from it. But on the other hand, if you're not committed to being a good mentor, just don't do it. Because if you screw it up, if you're a bad mentor, it's hard to, you've kind of interfered with somebody's progress, and you've given them a bad sort of experience that might be tarnishing them on a certain type of job or a certain type of career path. So don't do it if you're not really committed to doing it well. And then on the other hand, if you are doing it, build a culture for it in your unit by example. If people see how you might be helping people, students, colleagues, staff, you can transform your unit one day at a time by showing how good mentoring improves the overall climate in your department, and it just lifts the tide for everybody. Everybody seems to get better when there's that kind of mentoring going on. And I did want to mention a lot of initially good mentoring relationships have been messed up because the mentor maybe gets off track and starts asking the wrong kinds of questions and invading personal space. This is a professional relationship, mentoring, mentee mentor. Don't mess it up by making people feel uncomfortable. And sometimes we see that with faculty and grad students, right? Not good. We have to remember that there's, I don't know if power differential is the right word, but seniority differential. There's a lot going on there, and you just have to keep it professional. And remember to step back so your mentees can step up. That connects back to what I said about putting them in the limelight. And we've heard from Joel and Renee too that successful mentoring relationships are bi-directional. They're not always going to work. Sometimes if we have enough students, we're going to find a student that doesn't like us, doesn't think we did a good job. So don't be too hard on yourself when that happens, and try to document how things are going along the way, so that if somehow the relationship does end, you have some facts on your side about what you tried and you did your best, and it was oil and vinegar. And what can you say? Yeah. Okay, so that's what I had for you today. So thank you.
All right, Dr. Jeske, thank you for those thoughts. I appreciated your broad view of mentorship being not just faculty and student, but faculty, staff, and then also in industry as well. I thought that was very helpful. Thank you for that.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
All right, so our final speaker today is Dr. Nick Horton. So Dr. Horton received his Doctorate of Science from the Harvard School of Public Health and is currently the Beitzel Professor in Technology and Society, Statistics and Data Science in the Mathematics and Statistics Department at Amherst College. Dr. Horton is passionate about improving quantitative and data literacy for students with a variety of backgrounds, as well as engagement and mastery of higher level concepts and capacities to undertake research. Dr. Horton founded the mentoring program within the ASA section on statistics and data science education. As an applied biostatistician and data scientist, Dr. Horton's work is based squarely within the mathematical, statistical, and computational sciences, but spans other fields as well. His methodological research focuses on the development of approaches to account for multivariate response models, longitudinal studies, and missing data. He has also participated in several data science education initiatives through the National Academies, where he serves as co-chair of the Committee on Applied and Theoretical Statistics. So Dr. Horton, thank you so much for being with us today. Please start whenever you're ready.
Well, thank you very much, Sam. And I just want to give kudos to you and the NISS Affiliates Committee for doing the important work you're doing to raise these conversations and really kind of providing a support and structure for the next generation, which is, I think, really why we are so committed to mentoring. NISS plays a critical role at kind of filling in the interstices between our somewhat disparate institutions and environments, and I'm just so appreciative for the work that's gone. I thought I might just start taking on this role as the last speaker to pick up on some of the points that have been made so far. Sam, you started us off really, I think, thinking about how critical mentoring was at various levels. And we heard that directly from Dan as well. And also that kind of point of, you can be both mentor and mentee, and that those relationships may shift over time. I was particularly taken by a lot of what Joel had to say, this importance of flexibility, the importance of communication, this kind of, tendency that, we want to problem solve, but listening and validation are often going to be far more important. Otherwise, we create expectations, which may be challenging. I liked some of the things we've been seeing, both from Joel and Dan most recently, about the kind of the broad set of topics for mentoring. Joel talked about kind of just both job questions and search, technical questions, career success, work-life balance, service. And I think kind of thinking about those, particularly when we're mentoring, faculty candidates, others, graduate students heading off into academia or industry. But really this importance, and I think it's grown dramatically, of mentoring undergraduates. Even as recently as 15 or 20 years ago, I think it was relatively uncommon for undergraduates to engage in these high impact practices like research opportunities that we know have a big impact for them. And now kind of figuring out how we can be doing that on top of what many of us in academia are already doing. And I think we're going to see that the importance of that role grow. And again, those are all the things Joel had talked about. Joel also mentioned this idea of the lab model and research teams, and they'll give some resources in a few minutes, but I think that aspect of making things so it's less dyadic relationships and more of the broader sense of a lab in a kind of a science lab, or what we see in statistics labs in places like Berkeley or others, is that there may be high school students or undergraduates or early undergraduates and later undergraduates and master's students and doctoral students, postdocs, faculties, other kind of staff scientists who engage in various support and structures that I think make it more supportive and more successful for people to be moving forward. And I think there's a lot of aspects there when we can be thinking about baking mentoring into some of those programs. Renee, I loved many of the ideas, and it's great to see all your energy and enthusiasm, as well as kind of taking the advisor and mentor part and adding on explicitly this advocate component, because I think that advocacy, which again, heard from the other speakers as well, how do we help lift people up in ways that are supportive for them? And I think that, thinking about mentoring relationships that develop and change and adapt over time is a big part of what I took from what you were describing. I think one of the big challenges we still have in academia, industry, and government is that we have these somewhat opaque processes and structures that have developed over time historically that are not always transparent, particularly for those coming first generation to college or lower income or immigrants or others who are, at some level disadvantaged. And I think mentoring is really critically important to help kind of level people up and provide them the answers to the questions that they might not even know they should be asking. And I think that was really implicit in what Renee was describing, and a lot of other initiatives that have really focused on trying to deal with some of those disparities. I think these efforts that we need to kind of double up on, I believe, will help us create more inclusive programs and a more inclusive profession. And I think that's in everyone's best interest. I loved, Renee, your sense of what your strengths are and what they aren't. It spoke to me in various ways, but this idea of know thyself and set up a flexible plan. Plans are made to be, but at least putting those things out there about how things might work best on your end, your particular examples about how to kind of take a transactional thing and build upon it in various ways, but also balancing that. And Renee, you brought up the idea explicitly of peer mentoring. And this to me is critical, this kind of team approach and other kinds of things where you have these flexible relationships. Dan, amongst other things, I'm hugely appreciative for you of the handy dandy checklists. I'm going to download those for each of those different areas because it really helps, when we get busy, things get forgotten, and be able to kind of look at a checklist like that, I think is really valuable for students, faculty, colleagues, staff in various other ways. You also made some really important points about respecting boundaries. There's a huge power differential that we need to kind of be acknowledging in many of these relationships. Renee, you talked really well about how it may be easier for someone for whom you do not have a value of responsibilities. You might be a more effective mentor for them, though I think we need to be having such mentoring relationships for everybody. Turning to my kind of brief remarks, I have been blessed by a wonderful set of mentors and colleagues over time. And throughout my schooling and career, they've really been important for me as a sounding board, as a way of kind of getting guidance or advice. And I'm just hugely appreciative. And again, I think there's then that commitment to really pay that forward in various ways, and kind of make sure that that mentoring is happening at all levels. I think as a profession, we need to kind of build on what we've been hearing about, these kind of anecdotal things, and to really up our game and to institutionalize some aspects of mentoring. And again, I think building everything we've said today, but then also thinking about how we can really institutionalize it. It's important that there are such supports and buy-in to the time commitment that's involved here. It's a different kind of teaching and kind of structure of advising that I think is really critical to help people be successful, to help our programs be inclusive. And this can't just be a nights and weekends thing that some people do and some people don't. It's true, as Dan said, there are some people who are not good at it. We can work with them to try to make them better listeners, to kind of give them the advice and structures and practice to kind of improve how they are as mentors. There's always going to be individual differences, but I think it's something we need to really commit to in various ways. I think one of the questions that often comes up is this kind of, how do you be really inclusive and supportive of someone in a relationship like this? And I love some of the interesting and provocative questions that were put there. If we can work to be better listeners and to really validate and follow the lead of the mentee before we start to problem solve, I think we can end up with a lot of kind of productive conversations, because that aspect of just validating what they're saying, if there's a difficult situation, and then waiting for their lead on how we could help them support themselves moving forward. And sometimes that validation may be very powerful, may be sufficient on its own. So one of the real pieces of good news, I would say, is that there's lots of resources out there. And I wanted just to spend a couple of minutes sharing the webpage that I've just put on the screen, which I've entitled Resources on Mentoring. And again, kudos to NISS for pulling this together. I'm now sharing this webpage, hopefully, and you can see that I've included the announcement of today's session with links to all of us. And if there was one thing I would encourage people to look at, it's this STEM report, which is put together by the National Academies, came out in 2019, and it really talked about the key role that mentoring can be done to improve diversity and inclusion in STEM with the double M, including mathematics. And again, I think statistics, much of this is really very helpful for us. And I think some of the guidance here is well taken, that we should be using evidence-based approaches when we think about supporting mentorship. There's a lot now that's actually known about this that maybe wasn't the case 15 or 20 years ago, that we should think about structured feedback mechanisms to allow us to kind of really assess how things are going. Obviously, individual relationships may be less effective or others, but there may be ways that I think we can improve mentoring across the board. I think it's critical to be thinking about identities in membership. These questions about power differentials are very real. And I think some of them people are not thinking about them as much, but to kind of really be acknowledging how we can be working together in a flexible way when there are these kind of power differences. That there should be multiple mentorship structures put forward. And again, here's where I think departments and universities, academic units, as well as industry can be thinking about structures to make mentoring more effective. There needs to be a reward structure of some sort. There is certainly an internal reward of watching someone who you've guided kind of, succeed and start to then mentor on their own. But we also need to make sure that this is an important part of what we are compensated for and rewarded for in terms of our performance appraisal. And again, this importance, we need to make sure there is going to be aspects where mentoring does harm, and we need to figure out ways of mitigating that, addressing it, and supporting people. There's way too many examples of that. Dan, one of the things I was expecting you were going to show off was what I thought was a remarkable set of articles which appeared in the American Statistician a few years back. I've given us a link to some of these, but there's a whole set of these really well thought about ideas and approaches on mentorship. Some of them kind of thinking about undergraduate research projects, some of them thinking about professional development in various ways, focus on how we can be really fostering our efforts in diversity and inclusion. There's also been some papers in the American Journal of Statistics and Data Science Education. But again, these I think are pretty valuable for us to be looking at. I've also given some other resources. If you have copious spare time, again, it's still a challenging time of what we're living with everything, local and remote. But, I've given a link here to Renee's, the book she mentioned, other kind of papers, some in mathematics, some more generally in statistics and teaching, as well as kind of a shout out to some of these programs in that the ASA has done over the years. The Mentoring in a Box that the Committee on Applied Statisticians put together, as well as some of the programs that I helped develop in 2016. So with that, I will again thank the organizers and look forward to our panel discussion.
All right, thanks, Dr. Horton. I really appreciate the kind of the nice summary and kind of highlighting of the other speakers that you provided, and also that list of resources I think will be very valuable. So I think we can probably put that up on the NISS web page as well to kind of
please do
allow people to get to that. Okay, so thank you so much to each of the speakers and the panelists for giving us your thoughts. And so at this point, we have until 1:30, and so in the next 20 minutes or so, what we'd like to do is just to open it up for Q&A. And so if you, I know there's been a number of questions that have been entered into the chat, or not the chat, sorry, the Q&A box already. And so if you have some questions that you'd like to address to the panelists, please do that now as well. Just to get us started here. So this was mentioned by a couple of folks. And so maybe a question to kind of come back to this though. And so sometimes we as mentors are, we're busy, we're people, we're humans, right? And so there are times when maybe we don't do the right thing as a mentor. And so maybe I'd love to hear your thoughts. And so perhaps this hasn't happened to you, but so maybe you can speculate about this. But when we mess up as a mentor, so perhaps we give some advice that maybe isn't great. Or Renee, you mentioned kind of when we don't get to emails, right? How do we how do we react, or how should we kind of address the times when we maybe aren't doing the best job we could as a mentor? And so anyone who wants to jump in, I know this is kind of broadly to anyone.
I guess since you called my name, I can jump in. But it's sort of what I said, right? Transparency and honesty. Like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I messed that up. I didn't understand sort of what your goal was, what was going on. You know, and I messed that up. Let me help fix it. Let me, you know, whether it's leading them to another setting, whether, you know, problem, but, you know, honesty, and transparency is my simple answer. And then what do we do next? How do we go from here? And as I talked about the mentoring team, who else should I connect you to? Especially if this is out of my scope, so that I can help you get to where you wanted to get.
Great, thank you.
Sam, I saw a question in the chat, if you don't mind, and it was about the mental well-being of students is a great concern without entering their private space, and then the recognition that referring them to experts may not be something every student prefers. And so thanks, Nick, for putting that in, and thanks, Sheila, for the question. I mean, absolutely. I always, actually, I can't remember who, but someone, an advice to me was always have like the number of the counseling service or their pamphlet on your desk. And I try to do that, and I try to talk about it, but I definitely have students who tell me, oh, I went there, it wasn't helpful, or such and such went there and they're not helpful, or, you know, such and such who's our collaborator knows this, and I don't feel, you know, about privacy. And so again, you put the recommendation out there, but also what I said about connecting to networks. Like for me as a graduate student, the Black Graduate Students Association was so essential, and to be around others who were doing doctorates. You know, two of my best friends, I talk about it in the book, one is a PhD in philosophy and the other in political science, right? And that we can be there for each other and a community. I had a student last year during Zoom, and you know, and I just felt something, and I was like, are you happy? And she was like, no. And then I asked, what does she do? And all she does was her classwork, right? And then we're in lockdown, and she's in an apartment with her parents and her sister, and she was thinking she'd be at grad school. And, you know, I connected her to 2 other graduate students, and it was so great. And then they, you know, they started this network together, this study group together. They had the virtual happy hour. So, you know, if they don't want to go to professional start, I try to create sort of a network for them, or help put them into a community.
I again just want to kind of add on to Renee's excellent advice there. I think it's important for us to see students and our mentees as, you know, holistically, and we need to kind of be engaged and available to them holistically. And that means there's going to be trouble, you know, and difficult times. The pandemic has made life difficult for everybody. It's had a particular, you know, huge impact on a large fraction of many people. And a lot of that may not be easily obvious, though they're, in the case that Renee described, you know, you can actually see it on the other end of the Zoom. And I think one of the big challenges we have, and I think it's a little bit better now, but certainly when I was in grad school, there was not much training in how to kind of support students or others, you know, kind of dealing with serious mental health issues. And again, that's not our job to be the sole provider of that. That's not where we're going to be effective, and that's going beyond what we should be doing. But being available, making sure we, you know, there's a kind of a sense of openness for this. We're all, I would imagine, Title IX mandated reporters in various ways. So we've gotten training from our institutions and how to support, you know, kind of situations that are unpleasant, difficult, painful, illegal, you know, you name it. But to kind of be able to be available to them, and, you know, not requiring them to share, but to be available to them and to help guide them to kind of the places you know, they need to be. And I think that for an advisor and a mentor, you know, you don't need to be the answer for all things, But if you can give them useful advice about where to get those answers, I think that's going to be a kind of a structure that's going to be successful than just trying to be the one person answering all the time.
Yeah, I certainly agree. Having those resources available to recommend is good, but I think you know, the more seasoned, I'll say it that way, the more seasoned we become in our careers, there's a bigger age gap between those who are mentoring than there used to be. And then I think that's talking about personal things and even understanding what they tell us, quite frankly, sometimes can be increasingly more difficult. So I think what units should be trying to do is having this peer mentoring aspect that Renee mentioned, developing strong student clubs in the department. And you know what, NISS is doing something. They have a graduate student network that for their affiliates. All of the students that are at those institutions can now connect online, and they even have conferences that they run for these students. So I think providing support structures like that maybe can be quite effective at helping with some of these anxieties and mental wellness issues.
Yeah, thanks for those perspectives. So I know there's a couple of other questions in the chat. So there's a question by, do you have any tips on developing mentors/mentees for folks at smaller institutions? For example, if someone at your institution isn't a natural fit to be a mentor or advocate, how do we expand out beyond just kind of our local institutions?
So Sam, I can take a first crack at that. I think that was one of the reasons why we set up the mentoring program in the statistics and data science education section, because oftentimes there wasn't going to be a lot of mentoring there, or there might be statisticians in a small math department or something of that sort. And I just want to double back on Renee's comments that it can often be more helpful to have an external mentor as well as an internal mentor. And this is that kind of like team mentoring approach. I think having multiple people you can bounce ideas off of, particularly if they don't have evaluative kind of connections with you, you know, that can be both a kind of a really good way of venting if there are some, you know, grievances or issues, but also then some creative kind of support and from outside. And that's where, again, I think this idea of a team of mentors and kind of different structures that are providing different parts of Dan's checklist is going to be pretty valuable. To me, and again, you know, I'm a card-carrying association member, vice president of the ASA, former NISS board member. I think, you know, we're on this earth to kind of, you know, try to make the world a better place. And I think a lot of the efforts we do in statistics and data science to kind of use data to make better decisions and the like, the associations, I think, provide a really good glue and support that complement what we might be doing in our work or our departments. And that's one reason why I volunteered my efforts there. And I think that these efforts can help to kind of with that next generation.
Yeah, I'm happy to follow that up. That was great comments, Nick, and as well as echoing really good comments from Renee. I think it's you know, it's very important for us to give advice to go beyond just the mentor-mentee relationship and have this just dyadic scenario. That's, I mean, earlier and Renee, well, everyone's kind of talked about it. You know, working with teams is great, but I think there's a certain advice we can give. You know, some can happen naturally, like if there's a lab or a research team or something that the mentor is running. But in addition, you know, as Nick was pointing out, I mean, there's the associations are great, and there are resources within these professional statistical associations, and I think we need to strongly recommend to our mentees to take advantage. And naturally, they, you know, I mean, people find, I guess, maybe pseudo mentors in different ways. Some could be just a senior graduate student. Some could be someone who they really respect as a researcher, etc. Like there's different ways someone could earn the respect of a mentee. And so I think in just trying to encourage that they find others that can help influence their careers in a very positive way, and their lives, frankly, because it can be very enriching to be involved in these various associations or groups or whoever we happen to be working with beyond just the mentor-mentee relationship.
Yeah, thanks for that. So another question in the Q&A. So what are some things to consider when mentoring undergraduates? Have you found key differences, challenges, or best practices particular to this population when it comes to mentoring? So I know a number of you have, or I think all of you have mentioned working with undergraduates. So if there's any particular thoughts that you have, please jump in. Yeah, Joel, you want to, I saw you raise your hand. If you want to go first.
Sure, I'll keep my words shorter than my last comment, but I really enjoy working with undergraduates. I think it's, I really enjoy working with graduate students as well. It's very different. Undergraduates, they're kind of still feeling out what they want to do. They, read things, they take in classes, but it's not as if they've, kind of made a decision exactly where they want to head in their career, or at least if they have, it's very early in that stage. And I think they're in an exciting phase. They're willing to, at least in my experience working with undergraduates, they're willing to work very hard and just absorb. Their, many of them are sponges, and it's amazing to have that experience. And graduate students can be that way as well. It's just like I said, they're just at a different point, and they're kind of acknowledging of where they would like their career to go. And so anyway, I think it's I guess there's probably a little more structure that one needs to provide to the undergraduates. They're just because they maybe don't know quite as much about the field, about research in general. So that would be like one important difference. Thanks.
Yeah, so in my role as Vice Provost for Academic Personnel here, I review all of the merit and promotion files of our faculty across the campus. And one revelation to me is how the other disciplines, the lab sciences, work with so many undergraduate students at a time, like a dozen or more. And I was trying to process that for the longest time, because I've had a few undergraduate students one at a time, and it takes a lot of time. In statistics, I'm one that's meeting with the undergraduate student and trying to teach them at the same time as get some kind of, I don't know, new result or some insight, new insight, something, right? Whereas in these other sciences, they come into their labs and they actually contribute to their experiments, or maybe postdocs supervise them. So then it made sense. Okay, that's how they do it. So, but I think in our field, it's really not going to probably work that way, right? You have to be ready to pretty much work with that undergraduate student in the same way as a graduate student, but make sure the scope is doable. Because my relationships with undergraduate students have been like summer, 3-month undergraduate research kind of project. Carve out a little piece of a problem maybe that I was working on that they can help with, right? And that's the deliverable, because some of them will just come to your office, I think, and say, I want to do some research. And then they don't even know what it is that they want to do. They're hoping you have something for them. So maybe make sure you scope it correctly, and just be ready to add another meeting to your weekly calendars, because you're going to have to really meet with them. Yeah.
Dan, I think those points are really well taken, particularly about what aspect of this shows up in those tenure promotion materials, because I think it should count. And obviously, I don't think there should be a one-size-fits-all. You need to do this many research students to be, promoted, but actually having some structures where there is such kind of engagement. That National Academy's STEM report on mentoring really did discuss how valuable the experiences are and figuring out ways of creating those experiences. They have costs, as Renee was reminding us. We can't be spread so thin that we can't maintain our own work and our own balance, but trying to figure out those kind of structures in place. The statistics at a Crossroads report that's from a couple years ago, that was led by Shuming and Deb Nolan and others, really started to look a lot more at the kind of profile of our research programs and how some of the entrepreneurial disciplines, and I really think computer science and some of the lab sciences have created much more flexible structures in graduate school that have allowed bringing more students into a mix. And it's definitely a different choice than our kind of more traditional single advisor, single graduate student model. But I think there's some compelling aspects to it that might be worth kind of thinking about more broadly.
I just want to sort of expound on what I think Dan touched on, right? In terms of, and Nick has, right? We want to create inclusive environments. We want to create opportunities, particularly for those who have not had these opportunities. And part of that is meeting each mentee where they are. And so I've worked with from high school on up, right? And so there's a space for you in what I'm doing. It could be a lit review. It could be you put my tables together, right? And in that I teach you what we need from the assess output, right? Also, again, these mentor teams. And so I'll have a graduate student on the team with an undergrad, right? And of course I ask the grad student, is this something you're interested in? And so there's this sort of, structure of all of us and everyone's, one person's ahead of the other. And so just want to say again, meet the mentees where they are. Anybody who I say, any student who's motivated, who's proactive, you can be on my team. There's a space for you, and I can find something for you to do, and we can grow together. So just want to encourage that. Again, like I said, can't do this for everybody, right? But I've had the honor of working with SIB students while I was at NC State and at Emory. I even have a student, I gave a talk when she was an undergraduate, and she reached out to me and it brought her into the field. And now watching her go from undergrad to grad and to a postdoc, and now she's interviewing. And so also to put in there, again, like I said, these informal mentorships, and that you can touch somebody's life from afar and in a way where you don't have to be their advisor, where you're having these weekly meetings and things.
Yeah, thank you for that. Renee, when you mentioned putting tables together, my first thought was someone's like trying to put together some IKEA furniture, and then I realized you were actually talking about something different. Yeah, it is coming up on 1:30. So I really appreciate everyone in the audience being here, and also each of our panelists. So I know that I've really benefited from hearing their hard-earned wisdom and experiences, and so thank you for that. So really glad that each of y'all are here. And I also want to thank the folks at NISS for organizing this and sponsoring this. So thank you to Sumanta Basu and Ezra Karim for organizing this, and the folks at NISS as well. And my hope is that this is obviously a conversation about mentorship, but my hope is that the conversation doesn't just stop here, and this is really something that starts more and more conversations as we go. So with that said, I want to be respectful of everyone's time, and so we are at 1:30, and I apologize for not being able to get to the Q&A and all the questions in the Q&A. But like I said, I hope this is a continuing conversation that we, as a discipline, continue to have. All right. Well, with that, we'll go ahead and end the session. But again, thank you for each of you for being here, and I hope that you have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thanks everyone.